Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Mage, Errant, Book 7, The Last Echo of the Lord of Bells. Chapters 23 through 25. Deadly Weapons. Hurry up and wait. And the calm before the storm. In these chapters, we get to meet Talia's parents, and I like them even better than her siblings. I really, really enjoy these two. But also, it's almost time, kiddos. We got like a day left. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode. Dan is here in the chat along with MX Shard, and I've been chatting with both of them about Halloween because it's Halloween today. Boys and ghouls. And boys and ghouls and those who fall somewhere in between the realms. The veil is thin between the genders today. So these chapters, you guys, I really am, like, I hadn't even thought about Talia's parents. I don't know why. I felt like just meeting her siblings, I pretty much, like, got the gist and that was enough. But her parents, you know who I kept picturing playing these two? Was the parents from that 70s show? Which is an odd choice considering the way that show has been in the news a little bit lately because of some rulings the past month. But I just felt like the energy they carried was such that they seem like they're older and sort of like comfortable, but there's also an edge to them that you're kind of like, they used to cut it up though. They definitely did, you know? So I'm going to read this. It was immediately obvious who he was facing. Short, middle-aged, covered in blue spellform tattoos. The fact that her father had half a dozen hatchets strapped to himself, and her mother had a strange-looking unsheathed greatsword covered in odd little holes on her back didn't hurt either. He inanely noticed to himself he could easily see a number of differences between their tattoos and the more advanced ones of their children, but that thought was fleeting. I really liked this, that whenever there's a moment like this where somebody inanely notices something, I feel like that's always really affecting. There's something about that hits for me in terms of like the reality of how our minds work. You can be in the middle of like a total emergency and you will just fucking focus on the strangest shit, you know? So I always like those little details. So you're Hugh of Emblem? Yes? Was that an answer or a question? Look at you. Entirely too skinny. I don't see how our Talia hasn't broken you in two yet. Mackerel burrowed in harder against Hugh's side, as if trying to evade the attention of Talia's parents. You'd best believe we're going to fatten you up, boyo. Talia needs to be taking much better care of you than she has been. I'm not. And can you believe Talia's letting the poor boy walk around unarmed? Practically indecent. We need to strap a few knives to this boy. Or maybe hatchets. Oh, you want to strap hatchets to everyone. I like hatchets. They're darn useful. They are, but you use them even when they're wildly inappropriate. You're still on about the time I tried to eat a roast with hatchets. That was ages ago, and I learned my lesson. That was last week, dear. Oh, God, I love that. This is honestly just the way that arguments between Owen and I will go. You know, there'll be a sort of like good-natured quality, and then one of us will say something that really betrays the fact that we are not really seeing things too clearly. There's there's a you guys, I'm not trying to mock my husband, but he has this tendency whenever he loses something to think that somebody took it, even when it makes no sense that somebody would take it. And even one time we were talking and we were watching fucking Frasier, and you know how Bulldog, he's like, we'll look for something and he'll be like, somebody took my tape. This is total BS. And he pounds his hand on the table. Who took it? I can't oh, here it is. And I was like, that's you, babe. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, do you remember the time where you misplaced your Adderall prescription that you picked up and you were looking for it, muttering that probably you shouldn't have posted on Facebook that you were finally able to get your prescription filled because somebody probably came and took it? And it was like he had totally genuinely forgotten that he had done that. And he looked at me and he just went, shut up. he just put it in a different drawer, and he was already like, burglary, obviously, not just any burglary either. Someone on my Facebook friends list definitely like broke into our home. It's not that I misplaced it, despite the fact that I literally misplace several of my personal items every single day of my life because I have ADHD, hence the Adderall. No. Oh my God. Anyway, so this is just reminding me very strongly of the dynamic between him and I. So what must Hugh think of us ignoring him while he's right there? Let's go get started on fattening him up, shall we? Before Hugh entirely understood what was happening, he found his elbows in the grip of Talia's parents and was being half-dragged toward the nearest mess hall while they chatted away at him. They made it about halfway before Talia came out of nowhere in a blur, slamming directly into the wall so hard she indented her scrimshaw ward into the lithified dirt, which that really is something. I kind of want to see how that would even look. You haven't started telling Hugh embarrassing childhood stories yet, have you? Or giving him unwanted and unneeded bedroom advice? Oh, I can promise it's not unneeded, Rose said. Every young man needs that sort of advice, and you'll thank us later. Hugh and Talia both blushed at that. Oh my God, I can't. I'm trying to think, like, how would that even look? Like, what do you... And all I can think is, like, let's say she gives him some good advice and he uses it. And Talia's like, wow, where did you learn to do that? And he's like, your mom. I don't think I would ever be able to, like, let him do it again. I couldn't get past that part. Oh, God. Hugh, I'll provide a distraction. You start running and don't stop. Her parents just laughed, and a moment later they were dragging Talia along with them as well. So they go to lunch, and then they are dragged to meet some archmages. There were no doubt quite a few battle mages that could rival many of the archmages there in power, if not originality, of magic. For all their recent increases in power, Hugh and his friends were far from the most powerful archmages there, save perhaps as a group. A few, like Shimmering Cardivan, lingered right on the edge of being minor great powers. It said something that quite a few of the archmages greeted Talia's parents as peers. This wasn't, however, a planning session. It was more of a swap meet. And this is really fascinating. Basically everybody is bringing all this stuff that they, like, dug out of their basement because it was cool enough that they just didn't want to toss it. And risk somebody they don't like getting a hold of it, but they also don't necessarily have an affinity that works with it super well, or they have something else that's like a little bit more powerful or has like a different perk to, like, this is all just really, really fun to read, that we're pooling all our stuff because things have gotten so bad that they really feel the need to be pulling the stops out at this point, which is something that comes up a little bit later when Sabe convinces Ilinia and Indris to, like, sort of get over themselves, for, like, lack of a better way of saying that. But yeah, we're at an impasse here in terms of, like, what's the point in continuing to retain personal secrets if you aren't going to be alive unless you share some of those personal secrets? Like, why bother then? Hugh found out from Sabe that her grandmother had been deeply irritated by how many more enchanted items Indris had provided than she had. Nearly half again the number. It wasn't really surprising to Hugh, at least, given how wealthy Indris was, and how many enchanters she had working for her. And I can't help but wonder, like, I want to take this at face value, that Ilinia is just like, that's annoying. I've got to admit, you guys, I have this, like, deep suspicion of Ilinia that I haven't gotten over in terms of her, like, all I can do, I can't let go of this letter that got sent to Alustin outing Canderon and what she was up to. And I know I said that I think Ilinia is behind it. I want to take it back. I really do. Like, genuinely, I don't want her to be the one, because I would like for her to be decent enough to be like unequivocally on the side of people against the Havathi, because the Havathi truly are pretty terrible. I just can't think of anybody else that it makes sense to me for them to have been the one. And that doesn't by any chance, like, I'm not trying to say that there isn't somebody. I'm just saying, like, when I'm just throwing names out there, the only alternative is that it came from somebody that I truly have absolutely no inkling that it would be them that sent this letter to him. Or that it's somebody that we haven't even really met, like somebody who's, like, off-world somehow. Or, like the lady with the pipe. But she is on Canderon's side, so it seems. And then there's, like, what if, like, Canderon... She wouldn't have sent it herself, surely. She wouldn't have, like, been testing his loyalties. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because what I keep thinking about is the fact that Canderon is becoming a lich, and she obviously was sort of planning for this, so maybe she could have, like, set some things in motion, but she wouldn't do it this way and then render herself incapable of helping against Alustin when he's about to go absolutely ham on everyone. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I don't know. But my main concern at this point is Ilinia is the only one that feels like there's a motive there that I would understand from where I'm sitting with the information I have currently. And so with this moment of her being like, oh, you have so much more and better stuff, based on her behavior later, when Sabe has to be like, you too, are you going to fucking, like, come to terms with the fact that our world is going to end and y'all are still holding shit close to the chest? Like, you've got time. You don't got time. We're going to die. You know this. I wouldn't be surprised if Ilinia is just like, let me just, like, keep some of this stuff, and then be like, oh, I'm so embarrassed, I don't have as much as you, when really she's got fucking more, but she's just being a cheapskate about it. I don't know. I'm just probably reading into this a lot, so it's fine. Anyway, Clan Castus had provided quite a few weapons as well. These were an incredibly eclectic bunch. They mostly consisted of enchantments stolen in raids and battles over decades that Clan Castus members couldn't find a use for. Raymel the Chained, as a relatively new great power on Anastus, provided no enchantments of his own, though he did offer quite a few of his bones and scales, which attracted quite a bit of interest. Not least from Talia, whose eyes lit up when she saw the Hydra bone pile. Raymel did, however, with the agreement of Eden Slain, provide quite a few enchantments from Skyhold's own supply. Andus Thune had only offered a select few enchantments, perhaps a dozen in all, but those attracted by far the most interest. They were enchantments looted one and all from Heliothrax's lair and were deeply nasty objects. Among her other storied activities, Heliothrax had spent centuries destroying or locking away weapons she judged too cruel or evil for use, and those the Lightning Dragon Illusionist had delivered absolutely lived up to their reputation. They weren't even the worst enchantments in Heliothrax's lair, just those whose defenses Thune had been able to breach. Far worse waited in the depths of the Sunworm's hidden lair. I want more info on all that. So Hugh and his friends had room to upgrade. Hugh had 4 enchantments already: Force Boots, Mackerel's Force and Frost Blasting Spell, his Stink-Absorbing Marble, and Mackerel himself. On consultation, however, Hugh was going to be able to take a new enchantment so long as it wasn't too ridiculous. Mackerel and his belt were usually far enough away from him in battle to not pose a serious risk, and his scent marble was too weak to really matter. It was a risk, but worth taking. And all that, of course, ignored the Stormward's Crown, Talia's Scrimshaw Ward, Godric's Elemental Gravel of Clan Castus, their storage tattoos, Godric's Cometrian weaponry, Hugh's ward stones, and a half-dozen other tools and tricks that relied on wards or other techniques that weren't quite so volatile as enchantments. So I had forgotten about some of these things, and I'm just like, oh yeah, they've got a lot of like moving parts in here at the moment. And there was a shield that was, for whatever reason, built out of a strange wood that could absorb a truly absurd amount of water and bore enchantments for extreme durability. Hugh could think of quite a few uses for it, using his water magic to fly it around the battlefield while it was soaked, for instance. But it didn't accomplish anything the Stormward's Crown didn't already do better. I'll tell you what, kids, when it said that could absorb a truly absurd amount of, I really thought it was going to say damage or force or, when it said water, I was like, word? That just was really, really unexpected. There was a sword with a weak gravitational pull toward its foes that made it strike harder. Chainmail that randomly warped the ground's friction in a 50-foot radius around it, and a scarf that could alternately filter poisons from the air or for its wearer or fly about blocking arrows. Though for some reason, only arrows, not spells, or even crossbow bolts. That is so specific. I just really enjoy this. Pardon me, I'm drinking the last of my tea here. I really wonder... I've said this before. I stand by it. I would love to see Bierce's notes for the world building for this universe. Like when he comes up with the ideas for affinities and stuff, I just want to see the crazy shit that he brainstorms up. And then how he's like, all right, well, if there's a force affinity, then we can use that with this weapon. Or, okay, a friction affinity. What if we had chainmail that fucked with the friction of where people are standing? Like, because it's the exact sort of thing that kind of thing is not something that you notice when you are in the regular world, because that shit stays consistent or expected most of the time. It's pretty easy to look at concrete or wood or whatever floor and step on it and know what you're getting. But imagine you're standing on a forest floor and you're fighting the way that you would fight if you are digging your heels into dirt and roots. And then all of a sudden that shit goes as smooth as marble. That would throw you way off. Like, that would be such a strange, you know what I mean? Or even more smooth. What if it just suddenly became like there were banana peels all over the place? Whoop! There was a reel that I saw the other day, and this kid was really curious whether banana peels were as slippery as they were, like, put in cartoons and stuff, you know? So he's like saying, I'm going to test it out. And he's standing in his kitchen with the camera like on the center island, and he drops it on the floor and he says, I'm going to step on it, like step forward onto it. So all my weight's on that foot. Homie goes down so hard and so suddenly that it's almost like, where'd he go? Like, it's almost like you don't see him fall because of how fast. And he reached out and like tried to grab the counter to stop himself, and he just like pulled a glass down with him. And I was just like, well, okay, good to know. I had no personal doubts because that makes sense to me that they would be just as slippery as a cartoon says. But and it very well may have been not real, just, you know, set up, but it looked quite real. And if it wasn't, that was some good physical comedy. Earrings that would make bees consider the wearer a member of their hive. What? That is so wild. An amulet that could be used to suppress up to 3 specific tones or musical notes at any given time in a 100-foot radius, which that would be pretty effective up against, what's their face? The one with the sound magic. I mean, they were able to use a tone that was like lower than they could actually even hear and bring down a mountainside, you know? So Dana's saying Emerson Drees. No. The one with the beard. Shimmering Cardigan. That one. Right? Yeah. The most powerful Clan Castus item, bizarrely, was a knitted cap that vastly extended the wearer's comfortable temperature range, to the point they could safely nap in a blizzard or sit directly adjacent to a campfire, and it even gave significant resistance to fire and ice magic. Aside from how truly ugly and ridiculous the cap was, though, it was almost certainly too powerful for Hugh to risk using. That is amazing. I really love that. Look, I think there's a lot of us who wouldn't be averse to just owning something like that. I have such difficulty with finding a comfortable temperature. It's so annoying too, because like if you live with somebody else and they don't have the same temperature likes as you do, you or they wind up miserable a lot of the time. For me, I struggle with sitting directly underneath a vent for the AC. So when the AC is even quite low, am shivering at my desk, and I have to wear scarves and stuff in summertime. But Owen is still hot out in the living room because he's not directly under the friggin' vent. So he pumps up the AC, and I'm in here going, stop it. Would you stop, please? And just something like this. I know a lot of other people live in or work in office buildings where they have to fucking bundle up in summer because the AC is so out of control. This would be great. And then of course there's the usual enchanted bows that have high range and flying swords and daggers and yada yada yada. The whole time he was browsing, Talia's parents kept popping their heads in on him, encouraging him to pick one weapon or another. The bigger and more ridiculous, the better. By the time he had finished browsing all the other sections, the crowd around Heliothrax's weapons was still too dense for Hugh to be comfortable wading in, and he stood awkwardly for a while until he noticed Rhodes browsing Clan Castus's section. And Hugh, just on a whim, he goes, chats with Sabe real quick, and then grabs something from her storage space and goes over to Rhodes and gives him a weapon. And Rhodes is like, whoa, what is this? Sky Spear wood from the world of Limnus, strongest known wood in the multiverse. Metal can hardly scratch it, and yet it's still surprisingly flexible. And Rhodes is like, dude, I can't take this. This is like legendary weapon level. I can't do this. And he was like, no, we've got more, and we have full on ideas about what we're going to do with it, but we want to make sure everybody is like equipped. And Rhodes says, do you think I could buy some of that off of you? No. If you want more, you're going to have to go to Limnus. Well, I might do that. And Hugh just shook his head and wandered over to the weapons. I just really, look, I'm not trying to say that he doesn't show adequate appreciation for how intensely valuable this weapon is. But you will note, your boy doesn't even say thank you. He doesn't. He does not say the words. My goodness. Rhodes. Sir, do you want me to hate you? Like, come on. Just work with me here, bruh. All I want is for you to be a person. And you just keep... Anyway, so then Heliothrax's weapons. A morning star enchanted by a healer to leave wounds that healed incredibly slowly and resisted magical healing. Ouch. A spear inlaid with jade spell forms that could produce noises so deep they were inaudible, but could still instill feelings of discomfort and fear into them. Cutlasses, with durability and flying enchantments, which left Hugh momentarily confused as to why they were still in the collection, until he read the notes and learned they were made of human bone, and about the particularly gruesome history of their construction. An orange mask made nearby flames spread more swiftly was the tool of someone who obviously cared not in the least for innocent bystanders. A brooch meant for interfering with other flying mages did so in a deeply nasty way. Instead of messing with their magic, it provoked a weaker version of what happened to a water mage's blood when they ascended from the depths too quickly. Worst of all were the boots. Stone magic to carve trap wards into the ground beneath the wearer's feet that would ignite violently when anyone stepped on them and had no built-in deactivation methods. They'd likely sit for weeks or even years until some innocent bystander wandered over it, most likely a child. No one had any idea how many people each year were killed or crippled by old wards, but it was entirely too many. In the end, Hugh rejected every one of the enchantments looted from Heliothrax's lair. He even questioned whether they should be using any of them at all. Agreed. Look, I get it, pulling out all the stops, but Jesus, there are some stops that I don't know you should count them as stops. Like, so he goes and talks to Sabe about it. And he says, Clank Castus has taken a lot of those items. And are they going to use them? And Sabe says, what do they all have in common? And he realized they all have artificial reservoirs. What does Clank Castus do with enchantments with artificial reservoirs? They destructively turn them into elementals. You should check with Talia to be sure, but I'm fairly confident that's what's happening. And when he talks to Talia about it and says something about how, like, y'all aren't exactly noted for doing things that are for the greater good. And she's like, well, granted, no, but we'll be able to make elementals that are, like, way more dangerous than the actual weapon. And using the weapons just looks bad. It's not something that, like, we don't want that kind of rep. Which I definitely agree with that. But yes, set aside the disturbing nature of the stolen enchantments Andis Thune brought, and they're honestly not really that impressive. Terrifying and disturbing, certainly, but not that powerful. Take the Morning Star. It doesn't actually help you defeat your foes that much. It just punishes them a little more if they're defeated. If they're already more powerful than you, you're probably not even going to hit them. There are always going to be people arguing that greater cruelty is essential for strength or victory, but it almost never actually works out that way. The cruelty ends up being for its own sake. It never actually brings victory more swiftly. It just leaves lingering resentment. Like with torture, people claim it's essential, but it doesn't even work most of the time. They just make stuff up. The point is the cruelty. And I hard-on agree with that. I said hard-on. Well, you know what I mean. I just really, like, this is the sort of thing that gets me. The cruelty is the point is something that has been repeated a lot in the past 10 years or so. And I didn't really get it at first until I started to understand a little bit more about human nature and the ways in which we are willing to sidestep what has been proven via a great deal of analysis to be true versus what hits people in their emotional core. And it really does oftentimes come down to the fact that people like XYZ deserve to be punished. Whether or not any of the things that are levied against them turn out to be true, the thing that is being suggested to be done doesn't prevent any of that. It's just about punishing those people. And I just really, like, I'm not going to get into it, but this really hit for me. So what Hugh ends up getting is a friction amplifier. When activated, it would drastically increase the force of friction for a specific material for a few instants. It was designed for aerial combat. It could set a flyer painfully on fire. It was a bit odd that a one-use enchantment had been designed with adjustable settings, but Hugh had seen stranger designs. It required an enchanter to adjust the target, but they had several there on hand that could handle the adjustment. There was only one option that Hugh was even considering, so it wasn't a hard choice. Paper. You know? I mean, that makes sense. So look, I'm looking at my time here. I have really got to, like, pick up my pace here, but I really wanted to talk about all these weapons. They were all so interesting. A bit more boring choice than Hugh would have expected. She had picked a magic belt with reasonably powerful anti-heat enchantments. She had heat resistance built into her enchanted bracers, as well as some in her tattoos. But given how rapidly her powers were growing along with her new affinities, it was better to be safe than sorry. And let's see. Then we go to chapter 24. The couple of days waiting in Fort Maelstrom were somehow both deeply nerve-wracking and profoundly boring for Sabe. And I really, like, that's such a weird combo that happens so often. Honestly, I feel like they go together a lot more often than we think, because there's nothing like being unprovided with options for things to do to take your mind off it. That, like, if you don't have something to distract you, then the nervousness can only increase, you know? The last of their forces trickled in 2 days before the assault of Havath City. And we have, like, the meeting, and they're talking about approaching the city and how they're going to take so many casualties. We can minimize our losses. My illusions will help significantly with that, Andis Thune offered. They will, but even you can't hide our entire army. And Fort Maelstrom's meeting was set on a colossal platform near its top, big enough for Indris and Andis both. Even they seemed small in this setting. In comparison to the immense hydra bulk of Raymel the Chained. The 600-foot snake-like body had changed profoundly since the Battle of Skyhold. Hydras were capable of unnatural levels of body adaptation to start with. But the sentient enchanted chains had warped the Hydra even further. So they start talking about Alustin's plans, and again, they don't fully know all of them. And Ilinia says, we know when it will hit. I'm guessing that in its immediate wake will be the best time to strike. If we wait too long after that, it will give Havath time to reorganize. Plus, if our intelligence from Sadapsin is correct, if we wait too long, it will give him a chance to set off his second weapon, this chitin wand. And it says Sabe was not pleased to find out Alustin had stolen yet another magical superweapon. I didn't realize that she didn't know. And I should have realized it hadn't been mentioned. But yeah, I hadn't really stopped to think about it. If we can trust Alustin's claims about the timing, I'm confident we can trust that much, Sabe said, if for no other reason than Alustin's dramatic timing. And I really think that's correct. How can you do the drama if there's nobody there to see it? So you got to get everybody together for it. Yeah. So let's see. We can't burrow to avoid the artillery. Their underground defenses are too formidable. We're not going to find any path that doesn't lead us straight through. If you try to wait for the perfect moment inside their range, we're going to be demolished. If we wait outside, we're too far away to take advantage of the right moment. And they have the capability to fill the air with spells from ground level to the highest altitude mages can fly, even great powers. Most mages, Talia called out. Most mages what? Only most mages. And Elenia's like, me and Indris can't even fly higher than that. And she says, the kettle. And everybody's looking around like, what? And she pulls out a book. The kettle somehow managed to create a bubble of breathable air that allowed her to fly nearly 2 leagues into the air. Lass, the kettle was unique. We are not even sure what affinities she had. But pressure was almost certainly one of them, and I'm not sure we have any pressure mages. The only other mages I know that have reached those heights were the most powerful gravity mages and Thunderbringers, and they weren't actually flying. Does anyone have any suggestions that aren't? Talia burst out laughing, and Sabe winced. If you really are the greatest storm mages alive, surely you could replicate the magic of a mage who died almost a century ago. And at this point, Sabe chimes in. Talia has a point. Magic's really come a long way. And you two have never collaborated. I bet you could pull this off. And this is when Indris is like, well, we're allies now, but who knows what's going to happen? And Sabe says, well, is what's going to happen pose a risk to the whole continent, like us failing? And they both look at her. And there's a long, and then finally they look away. And it really seems like they've been sort of shamed into taking a position they had not planned on. So Kiata is the only one that knows. And he isn't sharing that knowledge. How does Kiata know? Luthi asked. The kettle was one of his librarians errant. So let's bargain for the knowledge then, Godric said. Kiata was always willing to trade, right? And Indra says the price he puts on is absurd. I doubt any assembled have a secret they'd like to share. So at this point, this is really fun. Hugh is like, how about I bargain with him? And somebody just yells out from the crowd, why would Kiata care about you? Just because you're Kandaron's pet? And I was like, you fucker. Pet? This kid is rapidly catching up to you. And also her heir, by the way, which he does say. Even without her here with us, Kandaron's legacy weighs heavier on the world than any of us ever will. And wasn't Kandaron's ledger filled with debts owed by Kiata or to him? And the Storm Queens look at each other and they're like, that's interesting. So he pulls out Mackerel and uses Mackerel to contact Kiata. And it takes no time at all before Kiata's like, ooh, what's up? Hold on, let me make sure that you're at the right IP address and that you're not just, using some kind of, okay, no, that's you. Oh, wow, a tornado fortress. That is extremely gaudy. I like it. I love the use. Delightfully gaudy. That's great. That's great. I feel like that's something that I can use to describe a lot of my personal accessories. How much would you be? Oh, here it is. He says, what have you done to that Hydra looming over you? And Sabe says, how much would we be willing to pay for that answer? And he responds, normally a moderate amount, but I would prefer to clear my debts rather than add to them. So Kiata's offer is, I'll give you the info you want to clear 1/7 of the debt I owe Kandaron. And they're like, wow, that debt must be substantial if he is willing to trade like this. But yeah, let's do it. And Mackerel's pages fill with notes. The kettle's affinities, wind pressure, friction, a list of mana techniques, enchantments, and the kettle's own writings detailing her process of designing and testing the bubble of breathable air she was named for. And I just really enjoyed how quick this was. It's basically like an email correspondence, and somebody just, Venmos some money over and boom, we're done. Do you think this is really going to work? Godric asked. It might. It just might. And none of it would have happened without me tweaking their pride, Talia bragged. Sabe just rolled her eyes at that. Listen, roll your eyes all you want, madam. A bitch is correct. So then we go to 25, Valia. Guys, Valia's chapters are getting more and more painful. And I don't mean like in terms of like, oh, it's a pain to read them. Everything that Valia is learning and assuming and going through, and all of the like assumptions that she is making are so wrong, or they're correct, but she's taking the wrong information away with her because of what she's discovering and how, like, you know what I mean? It's tough. So given the nature of the rumors about Heliothrax, it wasn't with excitement she approached the Sunworm's palace, but with trepidation. There were precious few servants, other than Heliothrax's mysterious representative, and none spoke to her or approached her, save him. Commander Warwell, if you'll follow me. It was dim and murky inside, with no light save for a glow crystal the representative pulled from his pocket. They passed over ward after ward, and soon it was clear they'd entered past where any servants were allowed. Dust piled up in the corners and across the floor, with only a thin trail worn in it by footsteps. Finally, they arrived at a massive bronze gate in the heart of the palace. To Valia's consternation, the bronze had already started to corrode green. It had been perfectly polished when Heliothrax moved in after the debacle at Skyhold, and there was no way it should have corroded this quickly, especially not with all the wards and enchantments against bronze corrosion in the city. The representative didn't seem to notice her attention, and instead pulled open a small wicket gate in the larger bronze door, just big enough for a person, and waved her through. I am so curious what the fuck is going on here. Because what this reminded me of was like the Rust Mage and the way her abilities were described. But I can't imagine, oh God. Dan is in the chat saying, what Heliothrax is doing is fucked up. Can't wait for you to learn. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh boy. All right. Well, you got me some dread now, Dan. There was no other light in the cavernous room. The crystal seemed to have dimmed, and Valia struggled to see even her own feet. For a moment, she could have imagined the room empty, empty save for the overwhelming, disturbing smell. Then part of the dark shifted, a few mother-of-pearl scales flickering in the light for just a moment, and she realized she stood directly before Heliothrax. Valia's sword sent her a note of fear, which she didn't blame it for in the slightest. So she's like, all right, I came when you asked. What do you want? And Heliothrax says, I have new orders for you and your warlocks. You will be hunting Alustin during the battle. Be the spearhead of the forces aimed against him. And Valia's like, they told me explicitly to not go up against him because of my failures in the past. We have been assigned as roving defense. I can't just disobey them. I have no patience for petty human politics. You and your warlocks are the best rapid strike force Havath possesses, even with your recent losses. It is foolish to waste you on lesser duties. If the Conclave attempts to countermand me, I shall simply fly away. The Dominion needs me more than I need the Dominion. It will be more difficult to reclaim my lair and get revenge against the Conclave for my humiliation, certainly, but it is nothing I cannot eventually handle on my own. Do not think your petty little empire indispensable. Will there be anything else? Merely a reminder that you should not allow sentimentality to outweigh the survival of your city. You may leave me now. Valia bowed, then turned to go. Heliothrax's representative promptly opened the wicket gate as though he had simply been waiting there in the dark for her. The glow crystal brightened once more as she stepped out of the dark room and handed it to the representative, and as she did so, Valia turned back to look through the gate once more. Before the representative closed it behind her, she caught a glimpse of the room past it. She saw just for a moment the shape of Heliothrax's silhouette, saw that what had once been lean and graceful for all the sunworm's colossal dimension had instead become bloated and warped, saw the sunworm loomed half again her previous size, larger than any other dragon Valia had ever known, saw the fluids staining the marble floor and the great heaps of organic debris piled against the walls, which were surely responsible for the smell of rotting meat pervading Heliothrax's chambers. And she saw that the rumors she'd heard about the sunworm were false. The truth was nightmarishly worse. Then the wicket gate slammed shut, and Valia was left to follow Heliothrax's representative through the dusty halls, accompanied only by her disgust. I can't believe that he's willing to tell us that she knows what it is, and then not tell us what it is. This is really, really rude. And I honestly can't even hazard a guess. I don't know enough. Like, the only thing that I can think, based on the fact that it seems like there's body parts laying around, is that Heliothrax is like grafting parts onto herself from other live creatures. And I don't really think that would be of particular advantage. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't... that doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, that's the only thing. Because, like, the fact that there are, like, leftovers, so to speak, you know, that there are parts that are rotting. So clearly they're made of flesh. And the description of bodily fluids... that's the only thing I can think of. But, like, what? Are other dragons? Would that even work? Like, I don't know. So, Valia is struggling real bad here. Over and over in her mind, she struggled over whether she had made the right decision with the weapons of last resort. She struggled with whether to support or report the Intertwine's combination coup and bid for freedom. Struggled with what to do with the knowledge that Alustin's accusations were true, that mysterious powers from other worlds were meddling with history itself, twisting the fate of the Dominion. Most of all, she struggled with her fear that Alustin might be in the right for once. That even if his methods were inexcusable, maybe he was right to be bringing down Havath. His methods might be inexcusable, but Valia couldn't pretend she could excuse Havath any longer. Between Project Vengeful Sword's threats to civilian populations, the revelation of the Intertwine's enslavement, and Heliothrax's monstrous self-empowerment, Valia's faith in the Dominion had become riddled with cracks. The Dominion had always flirted with the edge of what was acceptable when it came to their methods. But ultimately, the ends had justified the means. The citizens of Havath did lead better lives than those without the Dominion's protection. They lived longer, suffered less plague and famine, and most importantly, were shielded from the threat of rampaging great powers. Now, though, Alustin was the one giving civilians the chance to evacuate, not the Dominion. Valia had needed to fight and claw to get the resources necessary to get the capital's civilians clear. The Conclave hadn't even seemed to care about the threats to their lives. I just really hate this for her. She's just like, you can understand, because she doesn't have all the information, why she sees Alustin as maybe being the better option here. And he is just as terrible. He is terrible in a way that I would argue is worse, because I think he knows that what he's doing is unreasonable. It's reasonable in terms of like his own personal grudge, but he has just enough like self-awareness and perspective to know that it's not actually right, and is deciding to do it anyway just because it will make him feel better. And that's literally, when it comes down to it, all it's about is he wants to feel better. For what? 2 seconds before he also dies? Like, really? Oh, great. So, like, the Havathi are corrupt and horrible, no doubt. But there are, in some ways, actual payoffs for other people that there aren't with Alustin. So him just arguing about how, like, corrupt the Havathi are, but then doing this, there's no correlation between what he alleges his ideals are that he's fighting for and what he's actually doing. But she doesn't know that. So the position that she's in, like, she's just fucking, everybody is fucking with her. Like, I really feel for Valia. She is in this spot where it seems like she's got power, but ultimately she's not being played straight by literally anybody. So she's just got to do the best she can with very limited and incorrect information. And that sucks. Like, that's the worst possible scenario to be in, where you are sort of instrumental to the way things are going to shape out, but you're not going to be trusted enough to be told the truth. Well, then what the fuck? No matter what she does, there's going to be some big reveal afterward that is going to show her what a mistake it was. But if she did the other thing, same thing would happen. I just hate this for her. She's like, genuinely seems like a good person. She's trying her best in a world that sucks balls. And it's failing her. And it's making me like, she really does seem to want what's best for everybody. And nobody else seems all that concerned about what's best for anybody. And I'm like, I wish that she could be more in charge. But I also wish that she was not so naive in some ways, because it's such a fine line. Like, if you're going to be in charge, if you're going to rule, you need to be aware of the possibility of some shit being corrupt or people having ulterior motives. But at the same time, you can't be too paranoid about that, or else you won't be able to like get anything done or function because you're going to be so preoccupied, you know? So I have like this real sort of back and forth because, and I know I have talked about this before, but the thing with being paranoid about, oh, everybody is out to get me and do bad things. Psychology has proven that those who are the most suspicious of others are suspicious because they themselves would do the thing they are suspicious of others doing, were they in their position. In other words, if you are somebody who answers the question, do you think most people would steal if they could get away with it, with a yes, what that means is actually that you would steal if you thought you could get away with it. So I like the fact in some ways that it doesn't occur to her the lengths that they are willing to go to and how completely corrupted they are until it's thrown in her face, because she isn't that type of person. And so it doesn't enter her mind that anybody would do things that despicable. But if I'm saying that I would like for her to be in charge, I want a ruler who can foresee that people would be this terrible, just for the fucking like reality check, not so much that they would be paranoid. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, all this to say, Valia is like unexpectedly becoming this sort of island in the midst of the chaos out there that I'm like, oh girl, I wish I could just like pluck you up out of it. I'm sure she's not the only one who's got some ethics, but she's the only POV we're in with somebody with some ethics in this area of the world who's involved with this particular aspect of everything with the Havathi. So it feels like she's kind of the only one, you know? And then it ends with, Alustin's plans would destroy Havath City if they worked, and quite possibly bring down the Dominion. But if it did so, it would result in a massive land grab by the nations and great powers surrounding the Dominion, which was exactly what the Coven didn't want. Because in the end, there was only one reasonable explanation for the Coven's strategy. They wanted to conquer the Dominion for themselves. There was nothing high-minded or philosophical about it. This wasn't a competition over ideas, no struggle for the shape of the future. Candaron and the two Storm Queens merely wanted power, as they always had. And I'm like, ooh, is that... I get why it looks that way, but I don't know. And she's like, Alustin brought down the genocidal Crystal Sphinx. And I'm like, look, I'm not arguing about the genocidal thing because she did take out an entire city in this like horrific way. But also Alustin is genocidal. So, you know, like, whatever. Havath had ventured into methods beyond the pale, and it seemed had been doing so for decades. Alustin, despite being a vicious madman and the broken ruin of her friend, was the one acting with honor, avoiding needless civilian casualties. Oh, sweetie. Oh, baby. Oh, my sweet little angel. I'm so sorry. Maybe Alustin had been right all along. Valia was starting to believe he was right to condemn in practice, if not in principle. Because no matter how she looked at it, the Dominion had failed to live up to those principles. And this left her lost at sea, without any idea of the right thing to do, whether to support the Intertwined or seek to halt their coup, whether to turn and aid Alustin or not. Whether she should just flee entirely and bid good riddance to the monsters on both sides. And trapped in those mental currents, as the hours ticked over and they approached the eve of Alustin's deadline, Valia just prepared for battle and followed her orders, just like a good soldier should. I mean, this sucks. This sucks. I hate it. So, then we go to everybody underground with Alustin, who is just out here being like charming and flirty and funny and trying not to like think about the fact that everybody here is being led to their inevitable death. I swear to God. They camped in a massive lake cavern deep within Gisenna's demesne, where gentle fungal light rippled up from the deep, placid water. The librarian's errant didn't have a future. Tomorrow would, one way or the other, break the order for good. And this whole, like, I just don't know how he does it. How do you sit and have conversation and chill with these people? And know what you're doing. It's so gross. It's so gross. I hate it so much. So let's see. I'm trying to find the spot here. Oh, it's been underlined by a bunch of people. Invention was more a product of being in the right time than it was any product of intelligence. Brilliant people rose up in every time and place, but they only achieved brilliant things if they were given the tools to do anything. There were always successful people who wanted to believe they were special, not just lucky, that their hard work somehow mattered more than their circumstances or the vagaries of life and the great powers. They were fools. Alustin wondered how many people far more brilliant than him were out there that had been condemned to a life of menial labor for being born mind-blind. How many had died in childhood injuries that were easily curable by magic if the political will to provide healing for the poor were there, or that were simply slaughtered in battles between great powers. And then it says, the tongue-eater tried to interrupt his thoughts with alien whispers, but it seemed half-hearted, as though it knew the languages held within would be set free soon, and Alustin quashed it easily. And I was like, what? What? How are you, like, I just don't understand how he's living like this. What the fuck? So it ends with a scene between Hugh and his friends when they're just sort of like waiting things out. It's the night before the deadline. And Godric is saying like, well, at least tomorrow everything is going to be over. And Hugh is like, dude, no, it's not. Like, even if we win, we've got to keep the tongue-eater safe from everybody until Candoron wakes up, which is, she said, a year away. And everybody's going to maybe know about it by then. And and Talia is like, well, Ilinia and Indris keep us safe, right? And Sabe is like, are you high? No. They're going to be two of the people who want it the most. Like, no way are they going to want us to just run off with it. Which I was thinking the exact same thing. So I was glad that she was on the same page as me, because sometimes I'm not sure whether Sabe is going to take a like more rosy look than she should, but it seems like she's kind of wised up a lot in that regard. So let's see. I'm trying to find the spot where they're talking about the chimeras. Oh yeah. Havath locked up their labyrinth entrance. There's a chimera in there. Aren't chimeras notoriously unstable and easy to kill? Usually, yeah. Not this one, though. Kragath Clawmane is an ancient, apparently, far too old to just be your standard deranged hybrid. Most of the reports I've seen consider it the next best thing to unkillable. There are almost no labyrinths in the immediate region outside Havath City, so our best bet is probably make a break south, try to sneak through the Seekin battle lines, and find a labyrinth in the southern jungles. What about north or east? Well, there's plenty, but they're the oldest, most settled parts of the continent. All of them are guarded and have cities built around them. Some of the philosophers I've been reading talk a bit about that, Sabe said. Discuss cities as engines that process energy into life and culture, and how it doesn't matter too much what form the energy takes, whether it's food, trade, or mana. They can find a way to convert any of it eventually. We could try to break into one of them, Talia said. I'm sure we could, but their security isn't the real issue. It's just that it would make a ton of noise and make it easier for Ilinia and Indris to track us. Being sneaky, that would help us hide. I'd love it if we had a non-insane option, Godric said. Just some point where the right course of action was to hide in a lovely little mountain cottage with a fireplace and lots of books. Cheers to that, Hugh said, to general agreement. All of them struggled to think of anything but what would happen if they failed, and all of them tried to believe that they stood a chance against Alustin, and none of them truly achieved it. And that's the end of chapter 25. Oh boy! We're reaching the end here, kiddos. It's coming. All right, I'm going to wrap up. But thank you very much, Dan, for commissioning this. I'm having a lot of fun. I appreciate everybody coming to the chats and hanging out with me as well. And hope you're enjoying the coverage. So next time I see you, it'll be November. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.